This episode of Discovering Trek is dedicated to the loving memory of Dan's father-in-law, Doug Grindle, who passed away this week at the age of 70. Husband, father, Star Trek fan. We hope his loving memory comforts Dan and Sue in the days ahead, and may he rest in peace.
This week's episode of Discovering Trek is brought to you exclusively by Fansets. Later on in the episode, we'll have a special discount offer code just for Discovering Trek listeners. Discover a whole new universe of pin collectibles with Fansets online at fansets.com.
A reunion, a pinky swear, and a very fragile alliance. Episode 5 of Star Trek Discovery pulled out all the stops and gave us another action-filled and emotionally charged episode, which threw in a couple of old bleep moments that will probably be talked about all season long. From my favorite clandestine organization, and Dan's, to the amazing return of a beloved character, which may or may not be the one we expected, this one truly had it all. I think it's time we jump right into the snake pit and break it all down. Sitting in for Dan Davidson, my name is Bill Smith, and we are Discovering Trek. Welcome, everyone, to Discovering Trek, the Star Trek Discovery Companion, presented by Fansets. You know, we are without Dan this week, as we noted at the top of the show, due to a passing in his family. So we look forward to having him back soon and hope he and his family are taking the time to just enjoy each other's company right now. But for a couple of weeks, we've been thinking that at least one of these episodes of Discovery would be a little different or be a little game-changing. And it looks like we were probably pretty right. This one was pretty amazing, and we're excited to talk about it with you today. As always, this is the premier podcast for the most in-depth discussion and analysis for the latest Discovery episode, entitled Saints of Imperfection. And of course, we're going to talk about it. And when I say we, I am obviously not doing this alone. It's best that I'm not left to my own devices in these things. You heard him here last week on Discovering Trek as our guest. He's the co-host of PoliTreks on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. And this week, he's my co-host here. He'll be hosting JLP Live on the Trek Geeks Network for us later this year. But for now, he's the lovely and talented Barry DeFord. Barry, thanks so much for filling in for me this week.
I am very glad to be here and filling in for you again. And I am, as always, going to be your discount Bill. I tried to be discount Dan, and I just wound up with a nosebleed. So it's better that I'm discount Bill for sure.
Well, you know, he sets a high and lofty aspiration for us all to try and achieve. And I understand the nosebleed. I will never get there myself, but all we can do is slum it this week and hope that we get through unsupervised.
Well, that is the problem, is we are unsupervised, as sadly our guest Aaron Gallo won't be able to make it due to an illness. So we're sorry to hear about that, but we may heckle you, Aaron, once or twice throughout the show, just so you know.
That's a distinct possibility, because we ourselves are saints of imperfection. We do hope you feel better, Aaron. We're going to bring him back in an episode later this season, which we'll figure out probably shortly after we record today. But for now, Barry, this episode seems to have a lot. There's the mycelial network. There's Section 31. We got Ash Tyler. We got Georgiou. So perhaps you should tell our listeners how they can get in touch with us to give us their thoughts about Saints of Imperfection.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
Well, hailing frequencies are open, Bill, here in our dimension or in the mycelial network. So on Twitter, we can be found at Discovering Trek, and on ye old book of faces, as Mr. Davidson would say, or you would say, I suppose, you can catch up to us at facebook.com/Discovering Trek. In either place, you can become part of the discussion or leave us comments, questions, or maybe even your favorite moment from any of these episodes. Plus, you can also send us a voicemail by going to our website at trekgeeks.com and clicking on the giant blue button. Please do remember, though, that any comments you leave might be used in a future episode of Discovering Trek. Back to you, Mr. Bill.
Thank you, sir. Now, Normally, we would have an exhaustive recap for this episode, but we're going to forego that this week to get right into the discussion.
Trainees, to the briefing room.
Barry, as we sit here in the briefing room and gather our thoughts, let's get your sort of high level thumbs up thumbs up, thumbs down, and why for Saints of Imperfection. What did you think?
Overall, I'm going to give it a thumbs up, but maybe not as emphatically as last episode. So I'm not sure if this isn't because last episode was one that was just, for me, so good it's kind of hard to follow. But I guess there were just some story elements that I want to talk a little bit about that's got me, I'm not really concerned, but just sort of going, okay, we'll see what they're going to do. I guess there's just a couple knots sticking out of the rug for me right now on that. So overall, though, I'm really happy to see a favorite character return. I loved the effects. Again, just that kind of mycelial side dip was really, really cool. And the entire premise of the episode was also quite enjoyable. How about you?
I have to agree with you. It's a thumbs up for me. It's like you said, probably not as enthusiastically as last week. But if I break this episode down, I can almost divide it into a 2/3, 1/3 ratio. Whereas the first 2/3, I'm kind of like, yeah, this is pretty good. And then the last third, I really needed a box of Kleenex the entire time because I was just that emotionally invested in it. So if I could probably give a 2/3 thumbs up to the first 2/3 and then an emphatic thumbs up to the last third because I thought that they wrapped the story very well. So far, I mean, we are now 5 for 5 on thumbs up pretty much this season. I think it's a good sign, especially coming into next week, which we'll talk about later. But let's get into some discussion points and probably the big reveal in this episode. I do want to say that last week in the predictions, I did call that essentially there would be the return of Hugh Culber this week. I have finally gotten one right. I just want to throw it out there. Applause for me. Celebration. There's going to be a parade later in downtown Boston, kind of like the Patriots, but I have finally gotten a prediction right. So the return of Hugh Culber. Everybody in the world knew it was coming. There was the barrier gaze trope that fans complained about, and the producers told us right away, no, it's not that trope. And then people were like, well, yeah, but you better bring him back. They said, don't worry, we're going to bring him back. And finally, they've brought him back. So what do you think about this development, Barry?
Well, again, yeah, I mean, we were all sort of expecting this to happen. And I don't want to necessarily toot my own horn too much, but last year at STLV, we had the Night of Diversity party, and both Wilson Cruz and Anthony Rapp and Anthony Rapp's partner showed up for that. And I got to spend a little bit of time with those fine gentlemen and just had a chance to chat with them. And I could still just sort of see, as actors and friends, the chemistry that those two guys had. And so getting them back on the same screen together is not only super satisfying, it's also exactly what should happen. And yeah, I mean, we knew something like this was going to happen. The mycelial network has a lot more to it. I also really like the fact that they bring up the Glen and why everyone was all twisted out of shape. I was wondering if that was just going to be sort of a dangling detail that would never return, but now it makes perfect sense. And it kind of gives you an idea of what the people on the Glen went through if they were like halfway in between, getting like ripped to bits as their ship basically sinks into the mycelial network. Like, what a crazy thing. So to have Hugh come back and to get these continuities between the first and second season, I think is just a fantastic way to build continuity, build this story, and kind of like a delightful souffle. It doesn't always rise immediately, but I'd say it's rising now.
That's really a great analogy, or perhaps it's a simile, going back to Captain Pike, but I couldn't resist that. I'm sorry. I do think it's a great callback to sort of tying that thread off and explaining why it happened that way. Regarding Hugh Culber, I do have to say that first, they really made him look like he was truly tortured for the time he was in the mycelial network. You first see that character on screen sort of huddling by that bulkhead, and then you finally see his face. You're like, whoa. I thought that it was just a fantastic job by Wilson Cruz. I'm curious to see what this means for, the portmanteau of Culmets going forward. I have to think he's changed somehow, and perhaps, irreparably as a result of this experience.
There is no doubt that we are going to see a different Hugh Culber, and that is a little bit sad because he was so just earnest and honest and good, but I mean, this will change him. And I think that's kind of an important thing to just sort of keep in mind as we move forward, that I think this gives Wilson Cruz a chance to maybe revisit and reimagine the character to a degree. But yeah, I mean, you can't come back from basically hiding in an alien, not world, but dimension for that long and not have something that's going to affect you. And as we've seen kind of how Stamets has been affected by the mycelial network, I think Tilly will as well. And that sort of triumvirate of Tilly, Stamets, and Culber is going to be a really interesting variable as we move forward. And I think see the closing of the mycelial network, but at the same time, I think it's going to kind of echo throughout the rest of the seasons to come.
I suspect you're probably right about that. Let's move on to the dynamic between Christopher Pike and Leland. Whether that's his first name or last name, I don't really know. But we'll go with Captain for now. I thought it was interesting that these two were friends who knew each other, and sort of the rift that developed between them instantly with a threat. Not exactly what we're used to seeing in Star Trek, but I thought it was played very effectively.
I think that this Pike and Leland dynamic is pretty much what underscores the UFP and Section 31. They work together, but they're always kind of giving each other that side eye. I wonder sometimes if this is going to build a little bit more further. And I don't know. I've got a long range scan about Leland that I'm really excited to talk about. So without too much, I like their power dynamic. I like how they are definitely frenemies, and that's going to add to the story as we go forward.
Well, then let's move on to May and Tilly. Then we don't want to take anything off your prediction for later this season. It was nice. I feel like this story has reached its natural conclusion. I doubt we'll see May again. I thought it was very effective in the way it was handled in this particular episode. We finally, instead of seeing May as a manifestation in Tilly's head, we get to see them interact one-on-one. And then we get really explain the threat to her species in the mycelial network. I thought it was very Star Trek. I thought it was written exceptionally well. And I thought that May did a great job of demonstrating the gravity of this situation, which I didn't really get in the previous appearances.
Her childishness is really cool. She's got that sort of bizarre innocence, like where she's like, "Why have you stuck out your tiny finger?" and all this sort of stuff. She has these moments where it's very clear that the character of sort of mycelial collection of spores or whatever she is a younger version, right? There's almost something, I don't know. For me, it's kind of like a fungal Tinkerbell is what I kind of saw her as. She sort of has that innocence, but she also has a great deal of power. So there's a hashtag for you, Bill.
I was just writing it down. Hashtag fungal Tinkerbell. You always deliver, Barry. I can't wait to see where we go further on in the episode. I did think that, this season, I think there's been probably an overusage of Tilly as a comedic element, at least her character. And I thought that they toned it back really well the last couple of episodes. And I thought that the humor she injected in these situations was appropriate for her character. What did you think?
Finally, we're getting that measured version of Tilly that again, I think she's going to mature throughout the season. And, the fact that she manifested a sort of random friend student from the past kind of thing to incorporate, or at least, the fungus went into her brain and found that individual. I think that kind of says a little bit about Tilly's isolation as well. And I think that's going to be probably her bigger challenge moving forward. Like when she was trapped, Burnham was running for her life to come and see how she's doing. Stamets is not giving up. He's fighting as hard as he possibly can to get her. But I mean, really, who else does Tilly have a deeper sort of solid connection with? I think she's someone who makes very, very specific friends, keeps to herself for the most part. But I really hope to see her branch out more. And I mean, this isn't really a long range scan more than it's just a hope. I really hope that by the end of this season, this entire series, she is a captain and maybe the captain of the Discovery.
Interesting. I do like, to fast forward to the end of the story to talk about Tilly a little bit. I do like the fact that the characters in Discovery don't develop amnesia either within the same episode or just in general. Because when Burnham comes back to their quarters and Tilly essentially, cries on her shoulder for all intents and purposes. This is an experience that is going to inform her for the rest of her life and the rest of her career as a Starfleet officer. I appreciate that it just didn't become, all right, well, back to exploring the galaxy, as happened so many times in other Star Treks. So I did really like that aspect.
Yeah.
Let's pivot a little bit and talk about the return of probably our favorite admiral so far, Admiral Cornwell, she who does not yet appear to be a badmiral. So far, she's bucking that trend. But I thought it was interesting that Leland was clearly taking orders from her on some level, which hasn't always happened with Section 31.
I feel like she is bound to dabble in darkness from now on. It might be the connections that she had to the mirror universe. Of course, her revisiting Lorca, but not the real Lorca. Now she's working with a different Georgiou. And her capture during the war with the Klingons, I think this has changed her irreparably. And I think you're right in saying that characters here don't get amnesia. They don't forget these things. They wear their experiences and they react to it. The Cornwell we saw near the beginning of season 1 to the end is a very different individual. And her utilization of Section 31, I think, is going to lead possibly to maybe more of a Badmiral-esque sort of thing with Cornwell. There's a lot of Cold War connections with her. Like, she really does kind of remind me of like a Dulles or not quite a Patton, but there is that sort of element to her. Who is the commander of Vietnam? Oh shoot, I'm forgetting his name all of a sudden. But he would dabble in kind of a darkness every now and again to get what he needs. And so I really think that she is very much taking on sort of that Cold War general kind of attitude.
I think you're right about that. I think we saw that a bit last season with the end of the Klingon War, where she essentially, sort of has to go along with the plan to plant bombs inside of Kronos.
Yeah.
And then ultimately is won over by the crew of the Discovery by saying, no, this is not who we are. We're Starfleet. We're better than this. Mm-hmm. I think she wears a white hat most of the time, but there are times where that white hat has the slightest tinge of gray to it because of the role that she's in. And I kind of like that texture to this character. Mm-hmm. And I think it's played really well by Jane Brooke. I'm curious to see whether she returns this season and whether or not it's to play referee or to take some more serious action.
Yeah. And the general I was thinking of was Westmoreland. And
right.
Yeah. And, the ubiquity, it seems, of Section 31, I think, is important because, you're right. Section 31 is taking orders from Admiral Cornwell, which, again, we don't see in like Deep Space Nine in the future. It's not like that. So I wonder if we're going to see kind of a greater rift start to begin and happen between Starfleet and Section 31 after this event finishes.
Well, I think that almost has to happen. I think that a lot of people in this time frame know about Section 31, and I feel like in order for it to be as in the shadows as it is in Deep Space Nine, something has to happen. Whether it's disbanded like the IMF and Mission Impossible, pick whatever movie you want, because that seems to happen once a movie, and then they sort of work behind the scenes and not really in an official capacity. Whereas right now they seem really official. They've got their own deltas, they got their own ships, for crying out loud. Maybe they make a mistake. Maybe they do something so poorly that it brings the galaxy to war, and as a result, 31 is disbanded. We don't know, but I think that there's plenty of room for the writers to work with, especially when it comes to the Section 31 series, which I can't wait for.
Yeah. No, that is going to be amazing, and it's kind of neat to see the communicator Delta coming in and debuting and seeing where that comes from. Again, I don't feel like they hammered that one too hard. It was just, Tyler just hits his communicator and it makes a similar noise. And I'm like, oh no, it's like he's communicating across galaxies or something, or across star systems. Oh no, Leland's ship is right there. So it all makes sense there too. I really enjoyed that little piece and makes me want to get one of those badges now.
I think that there's going to be plenty of opportunity for that. Now, speaking of opportunities, Michael at some point is going to have an opportunity to spill the beans on Mirror Georgiou, because Pike wants to talk about it. He clearly wants to have that conversation. He doesn't want to have to track her down to have it. But I feel like that's something she's got to tell him, right?
Again, this is a long-range scan idea that I think Pike does find out, and I think there will be consequences. And Georgiou is amazing because, like, I have seen Michelle Yeoh play so many different types of characters, and of course, my first encounter with her was in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. This very stoic fighter who has a great sense of loyalty and duty, and I really felt like she channeled that with Prime Universe Georgiou. I really do sort of see a nice connection there. And then after that, when she becomes the Empress, she becomes this like completely different fascistic evil person that just makes me really excited to see how far she's willing to go to keep her power.
Interesting. I'm wondering now if I think I know what your long range scan is, possibly involving Pike. Mm-hmm. I've written myself a note. We'll come back to it later and see if that's really what it is. But let's talk about the search for Spock. And of course, I don't mean the third Star Trek film. I mean the one that's inherent to season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. Have they been teasing this for too long now? So here we are, 5 episodes in. We get little bits of it each week, and so far, nothing. Is it time for them to give us the carrot and not the stick?
Well, at last episode's diversion with Carol the Sphere was great, and I really enjoyed it. And it was good that we got that kind of little Star Trek side quest. And this one, again, I don't feel like it was a complete side quest. I think it was necessary to sort of push forward more of the mycelial network, introduce Section 31, and get Culber back. I think all of those things were great. But you're right. I think it's something we need to get back into the Prime storyline now, the main one. I'm good. Let's get back to finding Spock and figuring more about the Red Angel and doing that sort of thing. Because I think last year on DSE, we saw a very, very sort of straight-lined story that didn't divert all that much, with the exception of going to the Mirror Universe, which I guess was a larger diversion in itself. But this one's sort of this year's sort of dipping up and down and back and forth. So yeah, I want episode 6 to be, we see Spock now, and we get that story going forward. And
one final thought, and this isn't on our outline at all, but I guess I have a question about Ash Tyler. It appears now he's going to be on board the Discovery for the rest of the season. Is that going to pose a significant problem to the mission?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I think he is going to be a very, very negative variable when it comes to Burnham and Spock meeting up. I think he's going to maybe sour things a little bit and provide a lot more confusion and conflict for Michael Burnham's character, as she is now finally in a good place with Saru, anticipating the meeting with Spock, and now her ex-partner / betrayer / all of these other things is now sitting on the ship with her. She's really got to swallow hard. And actually, one of my favorite moments was that little, if you just see the little tiny twitch in Stamets' face when he sees Ash come on the bridge. Sure, it's all well and good that Culber is back, but I really don't think Stamets is over what Ash did, or Ash Voke did, and I don't think he's going to care much. And again, that could be a really interesting dynamic, watching Burnham, Stamets, maybe even Culber interact with Ash Tyler.
I was just going to say, I can't wait for the first time that Culber and Tyler come face to face, because that's probably not going to be awkward at all, right?
Oh, no. Just
yeah, no, it strikes me as being the kind of drama that I look forward to. I honestly can't wait. I hope that's a scene. It's got to happen. I figure it has to happen. I hope it happens next week, but I guess it's a we'll see kind of thing, right?
Well, Hugh Culber is going to be a bit of a different man, and I'm a little concerned he's going to know the old rule of when you need to kill a chicken, it's 3 clicks and you know they're dead, and it'd be the same thing with Ash. So that would be that.
Oh, too soon.
Too soon.
Well, Barry, we've reached that moment of Discovering Trek where we take a moment to pause and reflect on those we've lost in this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery. It's the somber and more reserved part of our show, but we feel it's the least we can do for those who paid the ultimate price, and we like to call it the Red Shirt Roll Call.
He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim. Dead, Jim.
Now, Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, but the list is, well, short this week in a word, but I think we're kind of sitting at -1.
You're absolutely right. However, this Culber, who we've gotten back, is powered by love and mushrooms. So I'm really excited that he has come back. And we have the delightful and talented Wilson Cruz back, and I'm really excited for that. So yeah, I guess we do have to take Hugh Culber off of the red shirt roll call. But, this is unprecedented for Trek. No character has ever come back from the dead, right? So yeah.
Never.
It's a first.
Never. Well, we love celebrating firsts, and please don't send us mail. We know it's not the first. But hashtag love and shrooms, right?
Absolutely.
Well, we raise a glass of synthahol and toast the return of Calmetz, our favorite Star Trek couple in this week's Red Shirt Roll Call.
This week's episode is brought to you by Fansets, the exclusive sponsor for Discovering Trek, and we are just thrilled to have them back for another season. Now available is the amazing Discovery Enterprise pin that was just released. It is bold, it is beautiful, and it is just the latest Star Trek pin available from Fansets. You'll have to check out their amazing lines of pins at Fansets. So do yourself a favor. Head over to their site, put a bunch of pins in your basket, maybe every pin, some pin accessories, all of those things into your shopping cart and checkout. Be sure to enter, though, before you do, this week's checkout code, Snake Pit. That is SNAKEPIT in all capital letters. Do this and you will get not 5, not 10, but 15% off of your entire order from fansets.com. This code will be available to use until Sunday, February the 24th, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So don't delay.
Don't delay at all. 15%. That is awesome. And of course, in addition to that beautiful new Enterprise, Barry, depicted at warp, I might add. Do you remember the special TOS communicator pin that we started selling exclusively on the Trek Geeks website last month?
I may or may not already have one.
Allegedly. Well, we are proud to announce that the next pin that will be available is going to be the TOS Delta Tricorder pin. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be available starting February 18th. And even better, it's going to be available on both trekgeeks.com/pins and fansets.com, which we are just so excited and grateful to Fansets for this. For those of you that are interested in purchasing the communicator and tricorder pins, keep your eyes on your social media for a special discount code that we're going to be announcing soon. Fansets. We are Star Trek, and as always, we thank Fansets for being the exclusive sponsor of Discovering Trek.
Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human.
Well, Barry, Star Trek has always been a reflection of our times, and in this segment, we like to take a look at what this episode helps us discover about humanity, or maybe even what it tells us about ourselves. It's usually the segment I look forward to the most every week. It's certainly the most thought-provoking, and in the past, you have always delivered in this segment, I would like to add, and I suspect that today will be no different.
Well, I liked it. There. No, I'm kidding. There is going to be better. This episode, I can't help but feel that push for the connection we have to those we love. Stamets got what so many of us don't get. He got his partner back. To be in love and to lose that love is a terrible fate. And it's something that, I guess, if you think about every couple that's out there, 50%, the one of those two is going to be the one to go first, and the other one's going to be the one to stay behind. And that is a terrible thought. And it is something that comes down the pipe for a lot of us. And I feel like Stamets as a character handled that with bravery and dignity. But getting Culber back is not just for Stamets, I don't think. I think it's for us as the fans. I truly feel our fandom helped bring Hugh Culber back, even though it might have already been planned by the writers and all those things. I really feel like we hung on to that, and we sort of stood beside Stamets a little bit, maybe vicariously encompassed a bit of that pain he felt. I guess, the other element, though, is, and it's something I just can't ignore, is the conceit we have as humans when it comes to authority, too. Pike really had to assert who he was in command with Section 31, Leland, Georgiou, Tyler, Cornwell. the structure of Starfleet as we know it is that of teamwork and egalitarianism, everybody doing their part. Section 31, I feel, much like the FBI, CIA, KGB, MI6, and others, sees itself almost sometimes as above the law. And it is in that I see the greatest threat to any society around the world. Once a group within it is given such sweeping power, it shows its true colors. I heard the statement once about loyalty, and I'm not inclined really to get much into that, but I think it rings true more for humanity than to assign it to a specific gender binary. But it's judge a person's true character, not when they have nothing, but when they have everything. And Section 31 seems to have it all, and it has all it wants. And it seems to need to do things to wield its power in a way that I almost feel is antithetical to Starfleet and the United Federation of Planets. So that is, I'm just worried that what's going to end up happening here is we're going to see just how far that power level will go with Section 31 and how it is going to really challenge the precepts that we all understand with the UFP. So as usual, and as Bill, you said a long time ago, I think in your Trek profiles that Star Trek is a mirror to our own society. I think this is something that we also should look at when we give people sweeping power, what they do with it.
Absolutely. So very well stated, Barry. Thanks. Normally in this segment, I would, wax poetic on what I felt Star Trek has taught me this week. But this week, although Dan isn't with us, he did record his thoughts on humanity in this episode. And he's asked me to include it for you all to hear.
Hey, everybody. Sorry I can't be with you here this week to discuss this week's episode of Discovering Trek. I want to thank everybody who has dropped messages of support and condolences to myself and my wife. It's truly appreciated. I wanted to submit my discussion about humanity this week because I wrote this piece before everything with the passing of my father-in-law, and I really think it holds a very special meaning based on everything that's happened this week. So thank you, Bill, for giving this to everyone to listen to this week. Death. It's inevitable. We talk about it every week in the Red Shirt Roll Call. We deal with it in real life. I'm dealing with it right now as we record this week. It sucks, but it's the one constant in the universe. I've been lucky in my life. The number of people I've lost over the years is very small compared to others I've talked to. I remember when I lost my grandfather when I was a young kid that I would dream about him being able to see him again and hang out with him. It was one of those things that I think kids always do. And as I've grown older, I've seen Facebook posts from friends who have lost parents or other loved ones, and it's something that even adults do. Just to have another moment with a loved one, to hold their hand, to have one more hug, to say the things that you wanted to say when they were alive. Reality doesn't always allow for that to happen, but science fiction does. Oh, how overjoyed I am that Stamets and Culber have that second chance at life together. It's one of those joys about sci-fi writing. There can actually be life after death, and they now will have the opportunity to say and do the things that Stamets thought was gone forever. But again, it isn't reality. So if you have someone you love who may not be able to be with you much longer, spend time with them. Tell them you love them. Thank them for everything that they have shared with you in their life, and be there for them. And once they've gone to that great beyond, always keep them in your heart. And rest in peace, Doug. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next week.
Well, there's no way to really follow that up. And we just reiterate that our thoughts are with Dan and Sue this week as they spend time with family. But I think what we're going to do now, Barry, is move on to some Starfleet commendations.
Commendations, Palm Leaf of Axanar Peace Mission, Grand Kite Order of Tactics, Class of Excellence, Prenteris Ribbon of Commendation.
We're going to talk about what we really enjoyed about this episode. 2 or 3 things really quickly, things that were real highlights. What do you really want to call out?
I again want to call out the special effects. I loved that almost Titanic-like sinking image of the Discovery going into the mycelial network, and all of those like pings and pong noises, and just the sound of the ship stressing to try to keep together between two separate dimensions. I really, really love that visual. So once again, it's always a joy. I guess maybe this is the inner crow or magpie in me. I just like to see shiny things, and and boy, they keep bringing the shiny. So that was really good. I mean, the other piece of that obviously is the return of Wilson Cruz to regularly scheduled programming of Discovery. That is a massive commendation. I think Wilson Cruz is a talent beyond compare, and to have him back to be able to play off Anthony Rapp, I think is just going to be a fantastic addition to this story as it moves forward. So more than anything, my Starfleet commendations goes again to the crew who do the special effects, and then the crew who bring us this lovely show every week.
Outstanding. I have 3 myself this week. First off, I feel like I have to call out a special commendation for Kirsten Beyer. She wrote a fantastic episode that really just conveyed a lot of emotion and heart, and really some essential Star Trek while we were at it. I thought it was just a fantastic job. I really liked the episode she wrote last year, the Saru-centric episode, Civis Pacem Parabellum, and I really enjoyed this one too. So that's my first commendation. My second one has to be for Wilson Cruz, or should I say series regular Wilson Cruz, since his name is now in the opening credits. Very excited to have that back, and very excited to see where this goes for Phillipa and Stamets. I know that it's just not going to be just happiness and love. Granted, that'll be there, but I feel like they're going to have some real challenges to work through, and I think that's really the part I'm looking forward to seeing next. And then lastly, like you, Barry, I got to take my hat off to the visual effects team. You know, Discovery has always raised the bar as far as visual effects for Star Trek on television, and this episode, I think, has kicked it up even higher. That sort of half in, half out effect, you know, especially on the bridge when you see the wave coming by, everything just looked brilliant. And it looked theatrical. You know, it looked like I should be watching this in a movie theater. That's how good it was. So those are my commendations for this week.
Long-range scan of planet complete.
Looking forward now, we get to look at long-range scans. This is the part that is just so much fun.
Is it ever?
Is it ever? We're going to talk about what's next for Discovery, maybe next episode, later in the season, maybe later on down the line in the series. I'm curious to hear what you think could happen next, Barry, knowing that I was right last week. Did I mention that? Did I mention I was right last week?
No, you were right. What were you right about?
Something small.
Something Star Trek.
Yeah, something Hugh Culber.
Oh,
maybe?
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
what do you got for us?
Well, first of all, everyone gets one, and I'm glad you finally got your one. And now that it's happened and it's passed, now you get the that sort of anticlimactic realization that you may never be right again. That's my first long range scan. My second long range scan is a very long range scan, and the point here is, I think Pike gets like, I think there's a whack job done on him by Section 31. I think they burn his poor beautiful face and blame it on Kirk and all of that sort of stuff. So I really hope that there's going to be a connection there. But I guess closer to it, the big long range scan I would say is Spock's going to come back next episode. He is going to really drop a bomb on the crew, because I think a lot of people have a lot of different intentions with him, right? We've got Ash has intentions from Section 31. Pike has intentions as his CO. We've got Burnham and her intentions as a sister, and just what Spock really wants to get out of this whole crisis that is forming under the Red Angel. So I think more than anything, we are going to see another very busy episode, and I enjoy the busyness, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, long range scan just coming up the pipe. We're going to be looking at Spock returning, and then down the pike, as we said last week, horrible radiation burns, and it's Section 31's fault.
I just want to point out, earlier in the episode, I mentioned that I wrote down what I thought one of your predictions would be, and so here it is. I'm showing to Barry on the camera. Pike injury, Section 31, question mark.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good drawing of Sailor Moon you did next to it. Wow. Holy cow.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, okay.
Have we telegraphed how old I am at this point? Yeah,
perhaps.
Yeah,
we were talking about Jell-O earlier, and it was different when in your time because it used to tell people to recycle metal for the war effort. So,
Come on, it's not like I'm as old as Dan.
No.
Well, Barry, those are some solid predictions. Knowing that I am the champion of predictions this week, and that I can do no wrong, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that this season, I think Ash Tyler is going to die. I think that he's going to have to, and I think that Michael Burnham is going to have to be the one that kills him. I don't know the context as to why, but I think she's going to be forced into that decision, perhaps to save Spock. But I think that Ash Tyler is not going to see the light of day in a Section 31 series, as much as I would love to see Shazad Latif in that series, because I love Shazad Latif. But that's my prediction. I think Ash Tyler isn't going to be around much past season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. What do you think?
I never even thought about that, but you know what? I think, we may be raising a glass of synthahol to him before the end of this series. And I think there's a lot there in terms of what Burnham feels about him. And I don't think Culber or Stamets would necessarily be too concerned about that, but I don't know. That said, that could also do a lot for the Klingon connection, right? Like, he's sort of that bridge, and if he goes, maybe that's how the bridge breaks, and then we end up with our next encounter with Errand of Mercy. So, oh boy, good one.
That's this one may take a little bit of time to bear out, but I'm pretty confident, or perhaps cocky. We'll see.
It's a solution of the two, right?
It really is. Well, Barry, that brings us to the end of this particular episode of Discovering Trek. It sounds like, though, next week, I'm pretty sure you saw the previews, and it looks pretty epic, don't you think?
I'm again, like I said, this is going to be another very busy episode. So buckle up and make sure you're ready to take in it all. I've had to watch these episodes twice, pretty much all the way across, just because I miss stuff, because I'm busy reacting to what has just happened that I've got to rewatch and catch the dialogue again and all that sort of stuff. So I'm really excited for it. Next week, we'll consider episode 6 of Discovery, entitled The Sound of Thunder. Joining us to examine this very Saru-centric episode will be our great friend and Discovering Trek producer, Casey Shafsky. Until then, remember that you can subscribe to Discovering Trek by searching for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or by heading to discoveringtrek.com. Plus, you can now support Discovering Trek and the Trek Geeks network of podcasts by subscribing to bonus content via Patreon. Get access to Bill and Dan's exclusive Carpool Conversations, see the first of our annual supporters pins, and check out our exclusive Podfleet t-shirt, along with so many other perks.
And of course, speaking of Patreon, I would really like to take a moment to thank the following amazing producers of Discovering Trek. We're so grateful to them for their support. And of course, every week they are fantastic people to us. And those individuals are these: Ken Tripp, the aforementioned Casey Shafsky, Jackie and Chris Hackney, Leonel Marchand, Craig Ewing, Sean O'Halloran, Chris Trabuzio, Eric Extreme, Norman Lau, Mike Bovia, and Patrick Escudero.
And if you want to become a producer of Discovering Trek, or even get access to the raw audio for Discovering Trek episodes, head over to patreon.com/trekgeeks.
Well, Barry, thank you so much for sitting in this week for me. If I had to rate you on a scale, you probably were about 1.5 times better than I normally am. So kudos to you there. I'm not comfortable in that seat when I go back to it, because I know you could be nipping at my heels anytime.
Well, it's good that you're not comfortable going back into that seat, because I may have sabotaged it. So definitely.
Or as Kirk would say, sabotage.
Sabotage.
Barry, where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me at BJORNDEFJORD on the Twitters. That's Bjorn DeFjord. BDEF is also a really quick way to find me there. And you can find me via PoliTreks, at PoliTreks on Twitter as well, and that way on Facebook too. And JLP Pod on Twitter is where I'm going to be posting in anticipation for JLP Live with the Trek Geeks, which I'm very excited to be doing. So yeah, that will sort of ramp up and crescendo over time as we start getting closer to the drop date for the new Picard series.
Awesome. Thank you so much, my friend. Well, folks, that's it for us in our discussion of Saints of Imperfection. Hit us up on Facebook and Twitter to let us know what you thought about the episode and about Discovering Trek as well. It's great to welcome an old friend back to Discovery, and it was great to welcome another old friend in Barry back to Discovering Trek this week. We thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to talk about this amazing new chapter in the Star Trek universe with us, and we look forward to sitting down with you again next week. Until then, here are some words of wisdom from Admiral James T. Kirk in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. How we deal with death is at least as important as how we deal with life. And until next week, never stop discovering.
Music for Discovering Trek is provided by 5 Year Mission. They're writing one song for each episode of the original Star Trek. Download their music at 5yearmission.net. Discovering Trek, a Star Trek Discovery companion, is a production of Trek Geeks. Executive producer Dan Davidson. For even more Star Trek discussion, check out the Trek Geeks podcast, available on Apple Podcasts and TrekGeeks.com.